archaeologists have found sensational evidence of the battle. The Mediterranean Sea is a treasure chest of maritime history, a veritable goldmine for scientists and adventurers alike. No one knows these waters better than local fishermen. Sometimes they are lucky enough to discover a clue that might help archaeologists with their search. However, their discoveries all too often go unnoticed when they collect something unusual in their fishing nets. For fishermen, bits of metal or wood are just superfluous junk in their nets. In the port of Messalongion, last-minute preparations are underway before the search begins for the shipwrecks of the Battle of Lepanto. The expedition will be stocked with all the latest technology, from side-scan sonar to remote-operated vehicles. The team has been preparing for over a year. Now its date with history is underway. The Aries star sets course for the southwest and out into the open sea. On board the research vessel, an international team of underwater archaeologists. Peter Nicolaides from Greece, Donald Frey, an American, and Rupert Breitwieser from Austria. Leader of the expedition is German archaeologist Matthias Kopfmüller.
Now and again something will surface from the bottom of the sea. However, to date nothing has ever emerged from this sea battle, and neither have any major research expeditions taken place here. Lepanto is still a white spot on the map of underwater archaeology.
With the expedition finally underway, there are high hopes that all of their methodical preparations will bring results. Prior to the expedition, the researchers spent many months immersed in Venice's gigantic state archives. Here, lost in 68 kilometers of corridors, lie original documents about the Battle of Lepanto. Italian historians have discovered forgotten letters and reports, including crucial ones written before the battle. In the 16th century, Spain was Europe's leading power. In Madrid, King Philip II ruled his empire with a heavy hand. He was a devout Catholic. In Italy, the Papal States were the religious center of power, led by Pope Pius V in Rome. The other power was Venice, Europe's commercial capital. The fleets of Venice's leader, Doge Loredano, had a monopoly over Mediterranean trade. During their investigation, Professors Marco Morin and Paolo Zelmi have discovered eyewitness records. They confirm the Venetians were long preparing for the all-decisive battle with their Turkish rivals. The documents mention nighttime meetings, new secret weapons, and calls for war. One particular name is referred to frequently, obviously a key figure: Francesco Duodo, a clever Venetian arms designer and shipbuilder. His military inventions would have a decisive influence on the coming war. At his side was Sebastiano Venier, seasoned admiral of the Venetian fleet. The clandestine meetings were desperately needed. The powerful Ottoman Empire was expanding into Europe. The rulers of Venice worried over their trade monopoly. Rome worried about the spread of Islam. And Madrid felt threatened by the military might of the Turks. The Ottoman Empire's capital was Constantinople, present-day Istanbul. As the empire grew, the thriving metropolis became an important naval port. From here, the Turks set off to conquer the West. The Sultan Selim worked hand in hand with pirates and renegade Christians. Their advance by water and by land seemed unstoppable. In Eastern Europe, they left behind a trail of destruction. By 1570, the Sultan ruled the territories around the Black Sea, as well as Greece, the Balkans, and northern Africa. Another momentous discovery was made recently by Turkish historian Idris Bostan. He found original documents once presumed lost about the Turkish fleet. They date back to the Battle of Lepanto.
No fleet could have survived a sea battle against the powerful Ottoman Turks. No country had a fleet to match that of the Turks. Neither Venice nor Spain possessed the means to fight the Ottoman fleet at sea. The only way to face them was to form an alliance.
The advance of the seemingly invincible Ottoman fleet and horror stories of their atrocities spread fear across Europe. The Vatican was alarmed. More than the ransacking of southern Europe, the Papal State dreaded the expansion of Islam towards the West. The Pope worked desperately to contain the advancing Turks. Vatican envoys paid numerous visits to Madrid and Venice. The Pope believed that only a powerful military alliance would stop the Eastern aggressor. His decree, "I will raise arms against the Turks," was more than just an idle threat. He made over a dozen attempts to form a Christian alliance, in vain. Tiberio Moro is in charge of Italy's military archives. He discovered the papal attempts to form an alliance failed because the European powers had differing interests.
Ecco che, dal punto di vista strategico, mentre I veneziani cercavano
Venice tried to keep its trade going by paying money to the Ottoman Turks. In doing so, they may have incurred losses, but at least trade continued, which was their main interest. The Pope, on the other hand, had no commercial interests. He was worried about the situation from a Christian viewpoint. The King of Spain, Philip II, was afraid of losing the land in northern Africa to the Turks that his father, Charles V, had conquered.
Officially, the Venetian leaders used diplomacy to negotiate with the Turks. Behind the scenes, however, the lagoon city prepared for war. This is clear in the memoirs of the Venetian Francesco Duodo.
In 1570, the decision was made to build, together with a large number of small galleys, 11 large galleasses, and to arm them for war.
It was the birth of a new type of ship, the formidable galleass.
Questo venne fatto in gran segreto.
Everything was done in absolute secrecy. The ships were armed with immense artillery, in total with 30 to 40 guns each. These were positioned both in the bow and the stern, as well as in broadside, so the ships could fire in all directions.
This new design had a decisive advantage over the ordinary galley warships. The old-style galley had just 6 light guns and 1 heavy gun at the bow, and only 2 small guns in the stern, and it could only fire forward or backwards. When attacked from the side, these guns were useless. The archaeologists on board the Ares Star know exactly how these ships were constructed and equipped. They should be able to identify a galley if they are lucky enough to find one. The battle took place in the Gulf of Patras. It's been over 400 years since the warships fell to the ocean floor. Final preparations are made to check the equipment. The side-scan sonar can trace objects on the seabed. Another device, the Remote Operated Vehicle, or ROV, can be used as an underwater camera down to 200 meters. All the data from these search tools will be analyzed and tracked by computer. The side-scan sonar is one of the most useful tools to be employed. It's been nicknamed the fish. Highly sensitive sensors on the fish employ sonar to map a 3D image of the seabed. It produces sound waves and then reads the echoes that bounce back.
We've divided our search area into squares, which we will comb with the ship, aided by computer. We can do this very precisely in the sub-meter range. We also drag two sensors behind the ship, a magnetometer and a side-scan sonar, which records the relief of the seabed. And the magnetometer establishes the existence of any magnetic anomalies that can be caused, for instance, by iron guns or anchors.
The search must be precise and methodical. Hour after hour, the research vessel follows the squares in the survey grid. It's an extensive area. In 1570, 1 year before the Great Battle, the situation came to a head. The Turkish army, with 360 galleys and 50,000 men, invaded Cyprus, a strategically important outpost of Venice. At first, the fortress town of Famagusta put up a strong resistance against the Turkish siege. The well-guarded fortress town held out for months against the invaders. But eventually, Famagusta's supplies and ammunition ran low. The Venetian cannons eventually fell silent. Marcantonio Bragadino, the fortress commander, finally hoisted the white flag. Despite his honorable surrender, the conquerors cut off his ears and nose and flayed the unfortunate man alive. The fall of Cyprus focused the European leaders like never before. The Vatican envoys in Madrid and Venice hurried their negotiations. With the horrific events in Cyprus ringing in their ears, the alliance which the Pope so desperately needed finally came together.
Eventually, all sides reached an agreement. The treaty was signed on May the 24th, 1571, in Rome. So, 400 years ago, an alliance was formed that was actually comparable with today's NATO.
The European alliance was named the Holy League. Its members were Spain, Venice, Savoy, Genoa, Sicily, and Malta, and of course, the Vatican. The Pope also contributed armed forces, led by an exceptional strategist with a brilliant career, Admiral Marcantonio Colonna, who had already fought against the Turks in Cyprus. In May 1571 in St. Peter's Basilica, the Pope presented Colonna with his mission. In the name of the Holy League, he was to set up a European armada to confront the Ottoman fleet under the banner of the Cross. This was to be a holy war. The Venetians, however, did not rely on the help of God alone. In the city's strictly guarded arsenal, the work on the Galleass project continued in haste. The arsenal became the largest naval arms forge in Europe, with an army of 5,000 shipbuilders, cannon casters, and sailmakers. The crucial feature of the new type of ship was the broadside armament. For the arms designer Francesco Duodo and Admiral Sebastiano Venier, the new Galleass will be a turning point in history. They immediately put to sea on a special mission.
It says here that Venice's leading captains were given orders to immediately find and, if possible, kill the Turkish captain Scirocco, and that this had to be done in a cautious, resourceful and discreet manner.
Ogni prestezza il capitano turco Scirocco.
It amounted to an assassination order for the Turkish commander.
per assassinare uno dei comandanti turchi.
Venice provided the largest contingent for the Holy League, as well as the fleet's pride, the 6 galleasses. These maritime combat machines were a watershed in the history of warfare. In the Gulf of Patras, the Ares star moves carefully along its course. For the archaeologists, the discovery of the remains of a galley would be a dream come true. The side-scan sonar is continually in use. A slow search like this can test the patience of the men on board, and particularly the expert at the computer, who must observe every minute detail.
It's somewhat similar to an aerial photograph, just like an airplane flying over flat ground. Every red line indicates a distance of 25 meters, which means that we can cover an area of 300 meters.
While some rely on high tech, others can fall back on years of experience. Both Donald Frey and Peter Nikolaidis know this area very well. They've been here before on separate expeditions, searching for Lepanto artifacts.
295, 297.
Nikolaidis explored the Gulf in 1976 with Jacques Cousteau. The famous diver and his legendary ship, Calypso, spent months combing these waters. Their search, however, failed to find anything. Donald Frey, on the other hand, was a little more successful. The physicist explored the same terrain 5 years ago with Peter Throckmorton, a reputable British underwater archaeologist. The side-scan sonar they used registered slight deflections, but the scientists could not identify the strange figures in the sonar pictures. Frey has had great success in finding underwater wrecks. His most notable discovery is the wreck of a Bronze Age merchant ship.
The kind of thing that we found on our excavation, 3,000-year-old gold pendants, maybe you can't find that, but you know, if you're lucky, you have a good chance to find a scabbard with a gold handle, ivory handle, or something like that. The magnificent weapons of the wealthy people that were involved in this battle.
The men will use a gas mixture called Tremex that allows them to dive to very great depths. Everything is ready for their first mission. This is the chance to make a great historic discovery. The divers will have to work 60 meters down. At that depth, they can stay down for only 30 minutes. Any longer is extremely dangerous. The seabed here is a gloomy desert of sand and mud, all except for a peculiar trough. The people on deck can see the shape on the monitor. Unfortunately, this is no secret of the past. These are furrows left by the dragnets of local fishermen. For the archaeologists, it's a minor disaster.
Everything's been scattered around. There's no way we'll find a wreck in one piece with all this dragnet fishing. The frames they use weigh up to a ton, and when they're dragged over the sea floor, they pull everything apart and scatter it in all directions. Just look at that. It looks like a car park with all those tracks. Okay, we'll carry on searching. That's all we can do. Don't worry, it'll be all right.
The heavy frames of the nets most likely destroyed any delicate objects on the seabed. There's yet another problem to complicate the search. The coastline here has slowly expanded far into the sea, especially around the island of Oxia. At least part of the area where the Holy League fought its sea battle has been swallowed by the land. Coastline changes have to be expected in this work. Here in 219 BC, the Greek town of Oiniaidai was a flourishing port. Now the excavated ruins lie 3.5 kilometers inland. For the scientists on the Aries star, the ruins of the ancient walls and harbour of Oiniadai contain important information.
Lepanto ist zwar erst 500 Jahre her.
Lepanto may have been only 500 years ago, but it has also been affected by this deposit. Parts that were sea back then are now covered by sediment and have become swampland. One can safely assume that several ships aren't lying at the bottom of the sea, but that they're buried under sediment. And it's also safe to assume that other islands existed around Oxia and that the coastline was a fair way inland compared to now.
The thousands of soldiers who went down with the galleys are most likely buried in the mud around Oxia. 2 months before the Great Battle, the Holy League assembled its best ships and its most capable captains. The war galleys from Barcelona, Rome and Venice gathered in the Strait of Messina. For a time, Messina became a gigantic naval base. The Real, the flagship of this impressive Christian armada, arrived there on August the 24th, 1571. The splendid galley was under the command of Don Juan of Austria, the son of the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. He had supreme command over the entire fleet. At the age of 26, Don Juan was already at the height of his career. His successful campaign against the Moors already earned him great fame. Now he was to lead 280 ships into a battle that would decide Europe's future. Don Juan recorded his recollections of those fateful days in a letter.
They all went into the battle with the greatest yearning, although one believed that the enemy fleet was much larger than our own. Due to the victories achieved in the past, the enemy was accustomed to military success and thought little of our strength.
On arriving at Messina, Don Juan inspected all the ships of his fleet. The Venetian galleys were undermanned, so he moved Spanish soldiers onto them. But this action unleashed tensions between the alliance that nearly undermined the Holy League.
Sebastiano Venier,
the supreme commander of the Venetian fleet, was an old, choleric and irritable man. A fierce quarrel broke out between him and Don Juan of Austria in Messina when Venier hung one of Don Juan's officers because he apparently didn't show enough deference to the Venetians. From that point on, Don Juan refused to speak to Venier.
Neither the tensions in the alliance nor the massing of troops off Sicily could be kept secret from the Turks. They had spies everywhere. When news reached the Sultan in Constantinople, he summoned his war council without delay. The Sultan's spies did their job well. The archives in Istanbul show exactly what the Sultan knew.
The Ottoman Turks knew exactly that Spain was going to participate in the imminent battle. They also knew that the Pope played a key role in the forming of the European alliance and that Venice was building its own fleet. The Ottoman leaders watched every move of the enemy and immediately passed on the information to the captains and admirals of their fleet.
The Turkish fleet was ordered to sail at once to the small port of Lepanto. This was the Turks' strategic naval base in the Gulf of Patras. Lepanto had been a Turkish stronghold for years. Behind the thick walls, the Muslim commanders worked out battle plans against the Christian fleet. They appointed the victor of Cyprus as commander-in-chief. His name was Ali Pasha. His second-in-command was a fearless and resolute pirate, Uluj Ali Pasha. The captains were confident. For decades, the Turkish fleet had always been victorious. Ever since the Battle of Preveza in 1538, the Mediterranean was their dominion. In the waters near Lepanto, the researchers employ a new device, the proton magnetometer. This highly sensitive instrument measures magnetic fields in the sediment. The crew are optimistic. The magnetometer can detect all metals, including lead, iron or bronze, no matter how deeply they may be buried. So long as they are in the right location, they stand a good chance of finding cannons, swords, or other metal objects. Unfortunately, an abrupt steering maneuver shatters their hopes.
The magnetometer has just scraped the bottom and the depth sensor has stopped working. Now we have trouble holding it at the right height. We can't gauge how far it is above the seabed, so we have to abandon the whole thing for now.
The damage cannot be repaired. Now only the side-scan sonar can provide usable information.
This is too little to be a residue from a battle, I would think. But I don't know what these things are. But there's almost nothing. On the other hand, maybe just one cannon fell overboard.
Or it could even be a person dressed up in his armor, you know?
Yes, lying on the seabed.
Because apparently the Christians were so well armored that and covered in steel. Yes. So if they fell in, that was that. That was that.
Your divers have to be prepared, you know, to find skeletons.
Yeah, we know that.
You know.
We know that.
On September the 16th, 1571, the Holy League's fleet left the Strait of Messina and set course for the east. Their destination, the island of Oxia. They too had spies who reported on the movements of the Turkish fleet. On board the Real, the Supreme Commander, Don Juan of Austria, worked out his plan of attack. The Venetian commander would bring the 6 new miracle weapons, the galleasses, into position at the front of the fleet. The other Venetian leaders had the task of protecting the flagship Real. The Christians would go into battle with the galleys deployed on one line and the galleasses in front to lead the attack. This would be the definitive showdown between the Cross and the Crescent. The men on board the Ares Star have been searching for days, hoping for a lucky break. The monotony is broken when unusual images appear on the screen.
Okay. Yeah, look at this. Wow. Wow. That's a lot. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4, right.
Really lot. But not too big, huh?
No.
It's not, looks not like a, like a wreck or anything.
No.
Wow. More and more. Could this be from the battlefield?
Yeah. There's a lot of wreckage here. Yeah. And there has to be some unusual explanation for this.
It's very impressive.
Yeah.
Very big.
And especially it's still very quiet over here. This would be maybe the size of one of the smaller galleys or something like that. If it went in the sand and then the sand covered it, you had a slight rise above the bottom. But so many targets. It's got to be something.
The scientists now need to understand the meaning of these irregularities. Could they be the remains of the actual galleys they're looking for? It's possible. The size of the area is large enough. This discovery could well mark the turning point of the expedition.
I'm pretty certain that it's not a riprap or a dumping area. Due to the structure and the positions of the individual objects, the way they are scattered over a large area, it seems very likely that this is a wreck. Is it a field of debris or an entire wreck? In my opinion, these are parts of a wreck. The structure is far too scattered over the area to be a complete shipwreck. Or maybe more than one wreck. Sure, it could also be more than one wreck that has come apart and disintegrated.
By October 1571, the Sultan's armada was ready for battle. 250 galleys and 60 small, extremely maneuverable warships, and 100,000 soldiers. When the Turks discussed their battle formation, a serious argument erupted between the two fleet commanders, Ali Pasha and Uluj Ali Pasha.
Uluj Ali Pasha advised Ali Pasha to stay close to the coast of Lepanto and wait, rather than go out into the open sea, away from the protection offered by their fortresses and guns on land. He believed that the enemy fleet wouldn't dare to venture far into the well-protected bay. But Ali Pasha, inexperienced as he was in naval warfare, was far too proud to accept this advice. He didn't want the enemy to think that the Turks were cowards.
So the Ottoman fleet left the safety of Lepanto and put to sea. Their aim, to annihilate the Christians in open combat. When the two fleets met, they formed a battle line in the Gulf of Patras that extended over 5 kilometers. The two fleets numbered 600 ships and carried over 200,000 soldiers. There were so many vessels it took the sailors 2 hours to maneuver them into position, closely packed, oar to oar. Each side was divided into 3 main squadrons. The greatest naval conflict in European history was about to begin. The Lepanto expedition is still a long way from prizing any secrets from the Gulf of Patras. Fierce spring tempests have forced them to stop searching.
The situation couldn't possibly be any worse. We have located the target area, we have definite indications that we are directly above some remains of the Battle of Lepanto, but in this weather we can neither dive nor use our detectors.
The archaeologists used the time to reconstruct the known facts of the battle with the aid of the charts. Only a few days later, their fortunes change. Local fishermen come to the team's assistance. They tell them about a mysterious old shipwreck at a depth of 10 meters, not far from the island of Oxia. It's the same place where the archives say the Battle of Lepanto began. The battle began amidst a blaze of cannon fire. The commanders relied on their oarsmen to propel their boats into action. For the Christian Don Juan and the Muslim Ali Pasha, this was the day of reckoning between two civilizations, between two religions. On board the Real, the Christian Supreme Commander gave the order to ram the enemy ships.
As one could recognize the Turkish flagship by the pennants it carried, I ordered the helmsman to steer the galley directly up to it. So he did, and the two ships attacked one another with great force.
The Muslims outnumbered the Christians, but the Christians had more sophisticated weaponry. Their guns were far superior to the Turkish crossbows. This was hand-to-hand combat, using hooks, swords and picks. A fierce fight raged for hours. It ended in an inferno of blood, severed limbs and bodies.
I testimoni oculari della battaglia nelle loro relazioni
Eyewitnesses mentioned the hellish noise in their reports,
the
thunder of the guns, the bang of exploding galleys that were hid in their gunpowder stores.
Ricordano le urla dei feriti,
the screams of the injured, and the sound of the drums, trumpets and whistles that were used on both sides to boost their soldiers' courage.
The wreck of an old war galley lies somewhere off the island of Oxia. The fishermen have provided the first real clue that gives the researchers a firm location for the Lepanto battlefield. The divers don't hesitate in going down to investigate. Hidden in the seagrass, part of an anchor. Only a few meters away, they find a field of debris. Broken pieces of wood are scattered on the seafloor. The first impression is one of complete chaos. Gradually, the divers begin to make out lines and shapes. A large number of ribs, the frame of a ship. The Battle of Lepanto was at its fiercest around the center of the formations, especially around the ships of Don Juan and his rival Ali Pasha. The two navies showered each other in cannonballs and gunfire, and then fell on each other in a torrent of hand-to-hand combat. The Spanish poet Cervantes knew firsthand the gruesome deeds of naval warfare. The galleasses that were constructed just for this battle played a crucial role. Their high-built decks made boarding and capture impossible. Moreover, they could fire from all sides. Venice's brilliant invention quickly obliterated a third of the entire Ottoman fleet. Just 4 of these extraordinary warships destroyed 108 Turkish galleys. The Ottoman formation was crippled, the proud supremacy of the Sultan's fleet broken. The bulk of the Turkish armada sank to its doom in the Gulf of Patras. For more than 400 years, the remnants of the greatest galley battle in world history have lain at the bottom of the Mediterranean. The shipwreck discovered by the Lepanto expedition is slowly revealing its secrets. With every new piece of evidence, the historical picture falls into place. Even the smallest object provides useful information. Wedged between wood planks and covered by centuries of silt, the divers find half of a cannonball. Scientific examination will determine its age and say whether the iron ball originates from the Battle of Lepanto. Not far away, a bronze gun barrel. The experts will establish the origin of the deadly weapon by its appearance and shape. They also find the matchlock of a harquebus. This firearm was standard equipment for 16th century soldiers. The researchers believe they have indeed found a war galley.
Wir haben diese großen Hölzer, diese langen Hölzer.
We found these large and long pieces of wood, which suggest very strongly that the structure could originate from a galley. Here you can see it again, and down here are the ribs. On these long continuous posts, in this area here, we presume that there must have been a deck.
Oder in dem Bereich sieht man, da wäre dann eben so ein Deck gewesen. Meine, welches Deck ist das, können wir
We
jetzt
cannot yet
natürlich
tell
nicht
which deck it
entscheiden,
is,
ob das jetzt
whether it was the lower or the upper deck that simply collapsed and broke away. We would have to dig it out, but it's definitely the supporting structure of a deck.
Another clue that this is a war galley. There is no evidence of any cargo. The flat structure of the keel and the narrow-spaced cross ribs offer further proof. Fortunately, the archaeologists have an accurate reproduction of the Real with which they can compare their shipwreck. The shape is identical, but it's too early to say whether this was Turkish or European. The wreck is the highlight of the expedition, a unique scientific treasure lying a mere 10 meters below the water's surface. It's presumably a galley. The site of the discovery off the island of Oxia and the historic archives support this notion. The researchers know that this was the area where the Ottoman fleet tried one last desperate attempt to break through the enemy lines. The Turks were not defeated easily. Only when the reserves arrived, and after the Christian commander promised freedom to the oarsmen slaves, did the tide turn in favor of the Holy League. The slaves, side by side with the soldiers, stormed the Ottoman flagship. Ali Pasha, the Sultan's commander-in-chief, died under the axe. In a gruesome twist, Juan of Austria ordered the severed head of his arch-enemy to be carried through the triumphant crowd of soldiers. The battle was nearly won. However, the clever Ottoman pirate Uluj Ali Pasha was still at large. Uluj Ali Pasha and his battle-hardened men fought savagely against the Christian Knights of Malta on the southern flank of the Holy League's fleet.
When the Maltese flagship was taken, there were 300 knights on board. Only 30 of them survived. The rest were slaughtered. It was a deliberate massacre, an act that was supposed to humiliate the enemy, just like the display of Ali Pasha's head on a pike. So the battle was not only about killing the enemy, it was also about showing contempt.
But when Christian galleys under the command of Don Juan of Austria approached, Uluj Ali Pasha retreated and escaped into the open sea. When the sun set on that day, the sea was dyed blood red. Hundreds of ships were left behind in the Gulf of Patras, floating tombs that sank to a watery grave. The archives say that 30 Turkish galleys ran aground, sank or burned down near Oxia. So this shipwreck could be one of those galleys. The divers have found more crucial evidence. Several broken swords, some with their blades intact. Corrosion and incrustation have rendered them almost unrecognizable. It will take further analysis to determine whether the soldier who once carried this weapon was Muslim or Christian. For the members of the Lepanto expedition, this is a sensational find, even though it raises more questions than it provides answers.
We found a cannonball, we found a gun, we found the matchlock of a harquebus. And, this is the most important thing for me, we found a sword. It's really incredible how well this sword has been preserved. Now, if one combines all the discoveries we have made, the only assumption we can make is that they were used in an armed conflict.
The preliminary conclusion is that the wreck was a war galley, but it's still unclear under which flag it went into battle. More importantly, the researchers believe they have at last found the exact spot where the Battle of Lepanto took place. This was where two powerful enemies once fought for dominance over Europe. The Lepanto expedition is coming to an end. They have good cause to celebrate. For the first time, the Mediterranean has revealed its secret cache of ancient relics, relics which have lain hidden under its waters for over 400 years.
It was a very difficult, but at the same time very successful expedition. We located the wrecks underwater as well as two fields of debris in the heart of this gigantic naval battle, one large and the other smaller. We're assuming that this site was the center of the battle. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack, but we actually found it.
There is still much more to find. Perhaps the local fishermen will